let's look at this interview um, right now that Rowan did just recently with Variety. This is from Variety, a new interview posted on October 19th with Rohan Campbell, who plays Corey Cunningham in Halloween Ends. And it's got all kinds of interesting info in here. And right off the bat, the one of the first things he says here is that David Gordon Green was adamant on not having him on any press for the film. And I find that, again, just so interesting right off the bat because the marketing for this film was very much this is the final battle. Michael Myers, Laurie Strode. Michael Myers, Laurie Strode. Final battle. Only one will survive. Michael Myers, Laurie Strode. And we talked about, maybe there's some misdirection here with this Corey. Maybe there's some red herrings. Maybe there's we talked about how so much of the trailers and the images were all from that final battle, which now we know it was actually the final battle. There was lots of thoughts and theories. Maybe it's from earlier in the movie. No, that was the final battle they were showing us and teasing. But, you know, now we know. Now we can look back and kind of say, okay, well, there was some misdirection afoot. There was, and it was pretty effective. I mean, they let us know right up front in that one sentence, which is why I obsessed so much over it. And as soon as that trailer and synopsis came out and Corey was even mentioned and it was official that, oh, this character is, if they're mentioning him this early out in this thing, this is going to be big. But they kept a lot of that from the advertisements, and they kept him out of the press so as not to really, I guess, spoil what a big role he actually has. Of course, now he's going to be all over the press. But, I mean, he's only 25 years old, too. That's the other thing. So, and he filmed this. You got to remember they filmed this. He got the role a while before shooting ended up starting. So he got the role 3 years ago, and they shot this over a year ago. So, well, not quite over a year ago, but so he's 25, and so to step into this, you just think about that, knowing that you're going to be stepping into this role that's going to be the lightning rod for this movie. It's going to be either the thing that people love or don't love about it. So I found that interesting that David Gordon Green was adamant on not having him do any press. They wanted to keep it very secret, and I mean, we talked so much in the build up, like, what, when's the, are they going to spoil things with the trailers and spoil things? And now we know. I mean, while they were spoiling some Laurie Michael things, maybe, it was this stuff that they were protecting. That's what they were protecting. He goes on to talk about the fact that when he read the script initially, he just assumed that he was going to die in the opening scene of the movie because he's playing a babysitter, and we know what normally happens to babysitters. Of course, they subvert that expectation with this particular opening. They go in to the Christine connection, and Rowan acknowledges that Christine is one of his favorite movies and that this whole film is so Christine in a beautiful way. That's his quote. This is so Christine in a beautiful way, is what he says. And, of course, Corey, shares some similarities with Arnie Cunningham, the main protagonist in John Carpenter's movie adaptation of Stephen King's novel Christine. And this is Rowan's first major film role, so he is going to be, a new talent to keep an eye on for sure. He is going to be everywhere, I think. But here is one of the most interesting lines from this interview. This is what Rowan tells Variety. He says, quote, "You want to do it so bad as an actor, but it's really scary to step into this. You can't doubt yourself for a second. When David offered me the role, he was like, I need you to know that a lot of people are going to really, really, really not be happy with what we're choosing to do here. You'll probably hear a lot of that. Jamie reached out and said the same thing. End quote. So Rohan goes on to tell Variety that he's very proud to have what he calls, quote, took this swing. And he even tells Variety about a private compliment that John Carpenter's wife, Sandy King, paid to him after the film's LA premiere. And of course, Sandy King Carpenter is a film producer in her own right and now a comic book publisher along with John. On the film itself and its differentness, I guess you could say. Rohan says, quote, this to me feels like the most David Gordon Green movie ever made. Stuff is funny, man. When you sit with certain audiences, they either get it right away or they're halfway through the movie and you can audibly hear them being like, what is the tone of this? And not giving themselves permission to dive into the humor or bizarreness, end quote. Of course, Corey, kills his mom, and apparently there's a lot of backstory to that whole family that we do not see on screen. Campbell tells Variety, quote, you should have seen the drafts. Corey is tortured by this woman because of how much she loves him. That home life stuff had a deep, deep, deep pool to it that we dove into. And he goes on to say that when he was working on his scenes with Allison, of course played by Andy Matichek, and the whole love story aesthetic, he says that he would make playlists for Andy. And it would include stuff like Nirvana, 90s punk, and what he calls a lot of cool guy music. This is interesting to me too because, again, Paul Logan told us in our interview that a lot of this love story for him was also inspired by 90s era disgruntled young people love stories. And he mentioned the film Pump Up the Volume, one of my favorites as well. And maybe it's because I'm around the same age as Paul and David Gordon Green and some of these guys, but this stuff really hits home to me. I was in high school and college in the 90s. I loved and followed Nirvana and all that 90s punk and grunge and that era of music. So when I hear these references, again, it kind of that's what they were talking about behind the scenes. It kind of makes sense that that's why I'm responding the way I am so favorably to this character, because they kind of wrote a character that they thought was cool, and they're kind of that generation and using some references of stuff that I guess I would agree is cool in my mind. Back on that romance with Allison, if you were confused about that watching the movie, Rohan says that some of the production crew were confused on set at the time on the day as well. He tells Variety, quote, there were 3 weeks where the crew was so confused about what movie we were making. It was romance scene after romance scene. I was upstairs shooting an indie movie with Andy, a rooftop romance, while people were getting their tongues cut off downstairs, end quote. And of course, there's always going to be speculation, what ifs. What if he didn't kill himself? What if they did run away together? Well, Rohan seems to think that maybe things wouldn't have worked out great for them together had they done that. He says, quote, Andy was always like they would have the best 3 weeks of their lives. They'd have this big burnout casino road trip movie, then it would just end in flames. They would just not be together, or one of them would be dead for another reason, end quote. So maybe they were always doomed one way or another. In this way, at least maybe Allison has some hope at the end of her story. And then in this interview, he goes into Corey kind of taking on the mantle of the Shape in some respects. I know a lot of you have mentioned even here tonight about that pivotal moment when they look deep into each other's eyes. Campbell says, quote, Corey can't handle the idea that Shape let him live. That's the thing that throws a spanner in his brain and short circuits something. And this still here, it's from that junkyard scene we've talked about. He mentions a little bit about that, including that brutal blowtorch scene, which I'm hoping we get to see a little more of that in some bonus deleted scenes when the Blu-ray comes out. But he says, quote, of that particular method of killing, he says, quote, that's so not what Shape would do. He's so artistic with it. Everything's like a painting for him. Everything's art. With Corey, it's just fury and hurt. Again, the more I hear this Rohan Campbell speak about his ideas for the character and what was going on there, and why certain things were portrayed the way they were, the more I like it. So Rowan's final thoughts in this interview with Variety on this now iconic yet polarizing character of Corey Cunningham. He says, with a laugh, quote, I could have saved Corey is such a funny thing to say. I'm so protective of Corey and his choices. When I talk about Corey, I'm like, yeah, of course he did those things. What do you mean? What else was he supposed to do? When I left the theater in Toronto, a group of people recognized me, and the only thing they yelled was, Corey is innocent! Guys, no, he's not. That's not the point of the story, man. The story's about choices, choices, choices. End quote. All right, you guys tell me what you think about all of these new comments on Halloween Ends from Rohan Campbell.